So, just recently, I got to go to Anime Expo for the first time ever. It was honestly an even better time than I'd already anticipated. I made a lot of new friends, I attended some cool panels, and I saw a lot of cool cosplays too. I also got to attend a bunch of premieres for upcoming anime, which is super fun as well. While I was there, one of the premieres I got to see was for Beastars Season 3, which is meant to be the final season of the highly acclaimed Netflix anime called Beastars. A lot of people are definitely looking forward to this final season, since Beastars in general has been pretty widely praised for how it tackles different societal issues within a world of anthropomorphic animals. And it does a pretty good job at creating well fleshed out allegories for things that exist in our world. However, a rather infamous group of critics on YouTube and other platforms are not excited about this new season whatsoever and are currently calling it and Beastars overall woke propaganda. And these are the same people that are calling Donkey Kong Bananza woke propaganda for supposedly having a non-binary ape in it. And the ones also currently worrying whether the upcoming Metal Gear Solid remake will be woke propaganda as well. Yes, this is somehow real. I'm talking about none other than anti-woke critics of Japanese media who apparently really don't like Beastars, DK Bananza, Metal Gear Solid, and many more things. Definitely makes you wonder what they actually do like sometimes. Anti-woke Japanese media critics tend to be very superficial with many of their criticisms towards media overall. Rather than looking at the things you should criticize when looking at any piece of media, such as storytelling, pacing, characterization, things like that, they'd rather look at the latest Lord of the Rings anime film and say that movie failed because it had a female protagonist, even though there were many other reasons that movie failed that didn't involve its female protagonist. Or they'll get mad at Nintendo saying they won't get rid of DEI policies and inclusion and call them woke and say they'll fail as a company in the next 5 years. Oh yeah, clearly in the next 5 years, Nintendo is gonna be totally out of money. Good luck substantiating that claim, guys. So today, I want to look at some of these anti-woke Japanese media criticisms, talk about why they're not real criticism, and talk about what criticism of Japanese media should look like overall. To start, let's look at one of the topics that a lot of these anti-woke grifters have a problem with that I mentioned before, that being Nintendo's policy regarding DEI and inclusion. These have actually spawned from two things in particular. Earlier, in May of this year, Nintendo of America's president, Doug Bowser, made a statement talking about the importance of DEI and diversity within Nintendo. Exactly 1 month after this was said, Nintendo launched their highly anticipated flagship console, the Nintendo Switch 2. One thing that was reported upon when the console officially launched was the changes made to the Mii Maker system. On previous Nintendo systems, when booting up the Mii Maker, you would get a choice between two different starter Miis that you could customize to your liking later on, one being labeled a boy Mii and the other being labeled a girl Mii. However, for Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo has dropped those two labels, although the Miis they give you are the same exact Miis they've used in previous versions of the Mii Maker. But unfortunately, all it took were these two pieces of news about Nintendo embracing DIE and also the changes to the Mii Maker for the anti-woke grifters to get pretty upset. One such anti-woke grifter who made a video talking about how he thinks Nintendo is all woke propaganda now was Dr. Disaster. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
One of the most insufferable things in the world is watching someone behave performatively in front of a crowd.
Huh, kinda funny you described yourself and most other anti-woke grifters there. Kettle meat pot.
Nintendo has kowtowed to the gender politics at a base level on their new console. It looks as though the Mii characters are now being made genderless.
I have seen everything that has ever happened, ever will happen, ever could happen, and yet, what the hell is this?
Yeah, we thought we'd seen it all, but Nintendo appears to have bowed down and listened to the woke bozos who run Nintendo of America these days. They, as a company, are once again utterly late to the party on this sort of thing, considering how far gamers have veered away from these politics in recent years.
I find it funny he tries to say that Nintendo is late to the party on woke politics or whatever, when, in actuality, these are just the same two Miis they always use in their Mii Makers. Whenever you boot up Mii Maker, whether it's on 3DS, Wii, Wii U, or Switch, you always get two Miis to start with for your template, and Nintendo Switch 2 is doing the exact same thing here. These are quite literally the same two Miis Nintendo has always provided for starter Miis, but it seems Dr. Disaster doesn't quite understand that.
but Nintendo has stubbornly steered into it, making the system virtually unplayable.
Oh yes, clearly
for a
Nintendo
lot.
Switch 2 is completely unplayable just because they changed the Mii Maker system and kept the same starter Miis but didn't label them the same way they have before. Clearly, the fact that the console launched with a very steep price point and not many games at all to play right away isn't the thing that we should be targeting, just the fact they changed the Mii Maker system. That's obviously the right criticism to make here. Who cares about criticizing the ever-growing price points of video games when you can just call Mii's woke? After this, Dr. Disaster talks about Nintendo's statement on DIE and says it's woke propaganda, and that clearly they're trying to pander to an audience that doesn't exist in his opinion for some reason. And apparently Nintendo is foregoing the original gamers like himself in his words.
They don't care about story, they care about presenting something that fits their diversity paradise. It's from these corporate deals that the term modern audience was coined. That isn't something that gamers made up. That came directly from these big corporate entities who believe they're doing something wonderful by pandering to a group of non-existent people that they imagined would take over gaming spaces and replace the original gamers.
You are wrong! All of you are wrong!
Okay, so first off, a lot of corporations discuss DIE and being inclusive when it comes to their hiring processes overall. This isn't just the gaming industry. Places like Lowe's or Macy's have this in full display on their websites. And when it comes to fast food places, a lot of them will put DIE on their Glassdoor pages to entice people to apply. Plenty of companies do this and have been doing this for a while now. This isn't anything new or part of any woke agenda. Also, I find it really funny that he thinks that Nintendo is pandering towards an audience that doesn't exist and is meant to replace the original gamers. Oh yeah, because clearly black people or Chinese people or any other ethnically diverse group wasn't playing video games when gaming became a thing. Clearly it was all only white people like Dr. Disaster. Clearly they're the only original gamers. Nice try, buddy.
Well, Nintendo is one company in gaming that has used a lot of these buzzwords in the past, but they have largely managed to avoid making games which felt like pandering. Unfortunately, it looks like Nintendo is now steering into this attitude with the Nintendo of America president, Doug Bowser, telling us how important diversity is to their company.
I find it really funny that he tries to claim that Nintendo is only now going in on diversity when really that's kind of always been a big part of their company and the characters they create overall. They've had several strong female protagonists in their games for a very long time now, Samus from Metroid being the prime example, pun totally intended. Plenty of characters from Fire Emblem also represent this mentality like Lyn or Lucina. And Nintendo actually has canonical trans characters too, like Vivian from Paper Mario or Birdo. This isn't something new for them whatsoever, so I'm not really sure why Dr. Disaster seems to think so. Ultimately, Nintendo's products have actually reflected different aspects of diversity for a really long time now, so this just doesn't make any sense. But, interestingly enough, while he's called Nintendo woke in a lot of his videos over the past 2 months, Dr. Disaster actually has the opposite opinion when it comes to another video game. In particular, when it comes to Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater Delta, which is a remake of the original Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater that's set to come out next month. I find this very interesting because he claims that this game, which is set to be an exact remake of the original Snake Eater, is not woke. Which, if you know anything about the original Snake Eater game, you probably know where this is going. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
This is your Admiral, the Dread Pirate Dr. Disaster, and it has been funny over the past few years to watch modern video games promote themselves with ugly female main characters. Games like Star Wars Outlaws, as an example, only to watch them get blindsided by piss-poor sales. This is a trend that has happened repeatedly in the past few years, and it speaks to what the actual audience for video games wants. But at least some studios these days are starting to realize that the actual audience for video games has a particular demographics to it. Gamers are mostly male, and funny enough, even the female gamers out there, who certainly do exist, but even they mostly prefer to see masculine male characters and feminine females, meaning that generally, if these studios would simply make things that appeal to dudes, they would sell a lot more games. That appears to be the conclusion that Konami has reached with the upcoming Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. But the thing is, This is a game that has avoided controversy, unlike so many of these other studios these days that go out of their way to embrace woke shit and piss off a massive chunk of the gamers out there.
So, according to Dr. Disaster, there is nothing quote-unquote woke about Metal Gear whatsoever. So, you're telling me that a series that is pretty blatantly anti-capitalist and anti-military and just a critique of the military-industrial complex overall, and one that just so happens to feature a bunch of confirmed LGBT characters isn't quote-unquote woke in your opinion? Because it sounds to me like those are the exact kinds of things that you guys would normally call quote-unquote woke, but it's funny you're not calling it that here. Things like Horizon Zero Dawn and The Last of Us 2, two games you guys often get mad at for being quote-unquote woke, actually explore a lot of the same things that Metal Gear Solid does and has been for a while. So I find it pretty interesting that you guys always call those games that just so happen to feature female protagonists quote-unquote woke, but not this one, which happens to feature a male protagonist, but still explores a lot of the same themes that you guys call quote-unquote woke all the time. Hypocrite much? Ultimately, the reason why Dr. Disaster isn't calling Metal Gear Solid 3 quote-unquote woke, even though by his criteria it probably should be seen as such, is because it has his idealized version of a male protagonist in it. Solid Snake is a strong, competent, stealthy guy with a beard. He's not a female character or a person of color, so there's no real reason for Dr. Disaster to try to sell you on the idea that Metal Gear Solid is quote-unquote woke, even though by his criteria it technically is. This just kinda goes to show that these anti-woke critics will only single out something and call it quote-unquote woke when it meets their own particular agenda. There's no real criticism to be found here whatsoever. It's the same exact thing when Clownfish TV finds a satirical article on Kingdom Hearts not being homosexual enough and decides to take it as fact and present it as such.
This one is basically complaining about Sora's sexuality.
It's compulsory heterosexuality.
How can you guys not see this is satire? Nobody in their right mind would take this seriously except for you apparently, literally putting the clown in Clownfish TV. Or like when 8-Bit Eric tries to claim that Capcom is woke now just for localizing their games apparently.
Capcom is going full woke and it's a freaking shame, ladies and gentlemen. They announced on their Capcom localization team's Twitter, yes, another localization team causing chaos. They posted this tweet that they're extremely proud of, calling it a global adventure through the lens of game localization. They're trying to make it sound exciting and fun. Do you guys remember when localization meant you were trying to explain to like 9-year-old kids why there's rice cakes in your Pokemon game?
Dude, come on. They call them jelly donuts in that episode. They don't call them rice cakes. That's been like a huge localization meme for a long time. Are you really gonna try to claim that something like that that's been mocked for a long time now is an example of good localization? Nice try, buddy. Or like when AndypantsGaming tries to claim a puzzle game is gay and woke just because he doesn't like that Xbox put it on Game Pass.
Well, boys, another week, another crop of gay and games being shoveled into the piggy trough by Microsoft. All you need is help. Dive into a quirky multiplayer co-op puzzle game where adorable, fluffy, cube-shaped creatures collaborate to reach their goals. These creatures, each oddly shaped, jostle against each other to help solve puzzles together. Like, huh? Xbox, this is the trash you expect me to play? I grew up in an era where Xbox fall lineup was like Splinter Cell, Max Payne, The Saboteur. That's right, little piggy. Gobble down the gay communist slop Xbox is feeding you like a good little sheep.
Ah yes, clearly this simple puzzle game called All You Need Is Help with little cute animal characters is gay communist slop. It's got woke propaganda written all over it, clearly. Honestly, he's probably just mad because the title tells him exactly what he needs. But interestingly enough, it's not even just Japanese video games that these anti-woke grifters will get mad at. They've also gotten mad at anime as well before. One anime they've actually gotten mad at is a slightly more unknown one called The Cafe Terrace and Its Goddesses. This is a pretty simple slice of life anime where a young boy inherits his grandmother's cafe where a bunch of young girls work as maids. He must work together with these girls to get the cafe back into tip-top shape and make his grandmother proud. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of this anime since there's a bit too much fan service for my personal liking, but if you like it, more power to you. However, a few different anti-woke grifters got mad at this anime and not really for the right reasons at all. Let's take a look at one of the videos that was talking about it.
I had no idea that I was going to be making a video on this, but As you can see from the screen, I've been watching certain anime. I have friends that are into anime and they recommend things from time to time. But something like this, a friend of mine was like, yeah, you should check it out. I think they were having a practical joke on me, but it is what it is. It's called The Cafe Terrace and Its Goddesses. The reason why we're talking about this is because this show, and I watched the first 3 episodes, it made me realize something about myself that I wasn't really fully aware of. This show really helped to put things in perspective. I despise the premise that is apparently a common trope in anime, where you have the main character get beat up by one or more of the female characters. I cannot stand it. I don't think I've ever been as off-put by a show as I have been with this one just immediately on that premise. The main character's in the bathtub, okay? I don't want to show the actual scene here, but he's in the bathtub. He puts up a sign outside of the bathroom saying, "I'm in the bathroom." And one of the girls, of course, walks in, and she doesn't have a towel on, she's just naked, just walks right in. The girl stands there and looks at him, and he makes acts like an idiot.
Wow, I guess we can give Templar the award for the best dying sea lion impression.
But then I think it's this chick with the blue hair here. Hears a commotion, comes into the bathroom, sees that he's in the bathroom, gets like anime angry, which is with the eyes and the aura and stuff, and then proceeds to beat him up. Now, when I was watching that, it sent me into an absolutely apoplectic rage. Because I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm trying to enjoy a bathtub in my house, and I'm letting these girls stay here, they're not paying rent, okay? They're helping out with, with the shop. But I'm trying to enjoy a bath here, and someone intrudes on my time, and they come in and make the situation uncomfortable by not reading that goddamn sign, and then some other chick comes in and just loses her temper and starts trying to hit me. I tell you what, I'm knocking that bitch out. And then I'm kicking her out of my house.
Okay, so right off the bat, he says this character put a sign on the door telling people not to come in since he was bathing. But the thing is, this actually isn't true if you watch the episode. They actually make it a very particular point that he didn't put a sign on the bathroom door, and that's admittedly why the girl accidentally walks in. So right away, this is already spreading misinformation. But I think the thing I find more interesting about this is that he thinks the fact that this scene features a man getting beat up by a bunch of girls is somehow woke propaganda. No, that's really not what this is at all. It's just this show's attempt at a gag or joke. Anime has a history of this in general, sort of mixing fan service to try and create a sense of comedy, like in this scene here. Admittedly, I've never found this sort of thing personally funny, and I don't really find it funny in this scene either, but I can see they're trying to make it come off as a joke. It's just sort of a common thing in anime to do this overall. There's no woke propaganda going on here at all, so I'm not sure why he's trying to claim that. Doesn't really make any sense. Just because there's a scene in an anime where a guy gets beat up in a bathtub by a girl doesn't mean that's woke propaganda at all. That's just a bad attempt at fan service.
Now, if you want to know the type of main character that I like, well, I mean, depending on the genre, but if for something like this, I would like a competent, well put together main character who is able to learn new things, learn new skills, adapt to certain situations, but ultimately has a firm rooting on his life. Now, the main character of this show is a college student. It's not even a high school student. So this guy in college is getting domed on by a bunch of women. I'm looking at this going, you intrude on my personal space. You don't take the time to look at the sign that I put up. I'm doubling your rent. If not, just expelling you on the spot. Like Harry Potter, I'm doing an Expelliarmus. I gotta share my frustration. I hate this trope. This weak men trope. Let him take that hand and just with the might of Zeus, just slap the ever-living... I don't know if I can say that on YouTube.
I'm not really sure why you think it's the trait of a competent main male character to be slapping women. I think we've gotten to the real reason that Templar wants to label this as woke propaganda here. He's ultimately just an incel. This is also very evident with his review of the live-action adaptation of the anime Bed, where he basically just goes on a rant saying the anime isn't highly sexualized anymore, and now it's too woke because all the characters are ugly.
CEOs, dictators.
Oh god. They're all ugly.
Or at least they're ugly in his point of view, I guess, because they're not showing boobs every 2 seconds. Thankfully, that's pretty easy to see through here, but interestingly enough, he's actually not the only one who's gotten mad at an anime before and called it woke propaganda. Another very similar thing has actually happened before with Nerdrotic, who is basically the second poster child for anti-woke criticism next to the critical drinker. In particular, Nerdrotic did a review of Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim, which is an anime film made by Warner Brothers back in 2024. This film was very loosely based off of some of the appendices in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings novels, and honestly, there are a lot of problems with it, but as you can probably imagine, it stars a female main character, so you can probably already imagine where Nerdrotic's take on this is gonna go. Let's see what he had to say.
Warner Brothers couldn't possibly make the same mistakes as Amazon, like wildly deviating from the lore, making up characters that end up subverting the characters that are actually written in the story, and they couldn't possibly go with a girl boss, could they? Well, now that I've seen the film, they went with a girl boss.
So, no, the thing that brought this movie under was not the fact that it featured a quote-unquote girl boss. Something like Prey features a quote-unquote girl boss, as a lot of these anti-woke grifters would call it, and is actually a good movie and was well received. Having a female main character is never the thing that brings a movie down. What does bring Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim down, however, is pretty much everything else and all the things that really matter when making a film. The animation in this film is incredibly shoddy looking and really cheap, and you can tell they just rushed it. As a matter of fact, this entire movie was rushed because it was swept out into theaters in order to meet a deadline so that Warner Brothers didn't lose the rights to Lord of the Rings to adapt into film. Their contract states they have to release a Lord of the Rings film in theaters every so often in order to hold on to the rights, so that's exactly why this film exists. There was no passion or love put into this film at all. It basically just exists as a corporate checkmark so they can hold on to the rights for the films. It has nothing to do with the fact that it features a female main character. It has everything to do with the fact that why it exists to begin with. But Nerdrotic doesn't really seem to understand that and is honestly focusing on the wrong thing here.
But it wouldn't be a Mary Sue story if we didn't have the guy who Hera stole the valor from telling her she should be queen. But she doesn't want to wear a crown because she doesn't need no man and she doesn't want no kids. And now we know why she's left out of the Rohirrim annals of history. She's a lesbian.
Okay, so nowhere in this movie at all do they ever say Hera is a lesbian. I really don't know how Nerdrotic came up with that, but even if she was, that wouldn't be the thing to knock against her for her character in this film. I think there are actually a lot of other things you could say about Hera in this film, because I personally have a lot of issues with this movie overall. None of which have to do with the fact it features a female protagonist. Like I said before, the cheap animation is definitely a huge turnoff for me, but I also think the story is just super underwhelming. For those unaware, this film is actually adapting 3 pages of an appendices in Lord of the Rings that actually talks about the origin of Helm's Deep. The story is pretty short given it's only 3 pages, but the thing is, this film felt the need to stretch that out into 2 hours and 14 minutes. That makes the pacing of the film feel super off as opposed to the original story it's based on, and honestly, this story is just stretched super thin here to fit a 2 hour and 14 minute mark. This film was also a financial failure for Warner Brothers, but again, not because it has a female protagonist in it. This film was actually barely marketed at all when it was coming out. And the one big trailer that Warner Brothers did release for this film just featured a bunch of scenes from the Peter Jackson trilogy from back in the 2000s. This obviously was an attempt to try and pander to nostalgia for fans of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, but honestly, if you look at the story that those films were adapting as opposed to the story this one was, that wasn't a good tactic. The entire Lord of the Rings trilogy and the small story about Helm's Deep's origins are 2 totally different things to adapt. So trying to draw comparisons between the two within marketing really wasn't a smart move on Warner Brothers' part at all. Ultimately, the Lord of the Rings anime film didn't fail because it had a female protagonist, it failed because of poor marketing decisions and also the fact the story was stretched way too far. And again, the animation quality on this one is honestly pretty crappy too. There are so many other more legitimate things you could throw at Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim as real criticisms, but Nerdrotic just isn't doing that. He just wants to try and pinpoint the fact that this film has a female protagonist as its main downfall when that's just not really the case at all. But believe it or not, Nerdrotic and Tactical Templar are not even the only two people that have created bad faith criticism revolving around anime. Probably one of the most infamous people that does this is none other than Rev Says Desu, an anti-woke VTuber. I've covered Rev a few times before on this channel, but especially with a topic like this, he honestly seems like probably the most applicable person here. One of the things that Rev is most notable for is being a lol. He will often try to create a narrative that there's an entire group of quote-unquote anime tourists out there that are ruining lolly in anime and making it so that the original fans of anime don't get what they want. And yes, that is as ridiculous and nonsensical as it sounds. Rev is probably one of the most notorious examples of these grifter types when it comes to Japanese media because he doesn't really hone in on the things you should look at when criticizing any media. He will often only criticize media or different audiences if there's lolly things involved and if it's getting removed. A very good example of this is the time that Rev got upset when a certain piece of art got removed from the r/Hololive subreddit. In particular, this was a piece of art showcasing different VTubers that are a part of Hololive in lieu of a certain on H-word anime. No, I am not making this up. And lo and behold, Rev made an entire video on this topic. Let's see what he had to say.
Hey, what's up guys? Rev here. Today we're gonna discuss some culture. Proof that a picture can be worth 1,000 words. Until it's banned, of course. So here's the thread, an original piece of art posted on the official Hololive subreddit. To sum this up, if you know, you know. But in case you don't know, or if you want to sit back and reminisce for a few seconds if you do, this artwork is a reference to Shoujo Ramune. What is that, one might ask? It's a cute anime about a couple of adolescents learning about life, doing some idol training, having some yogurt, hanging out at bus stops, a very wholesome slice of life anime. Okay, so it's a very popular on hentai.
Huh, maybe they didn't want something with a piece of art in it that sexualizes underage girls. Doesn't seem that odd to me. And this is basically Rev's entire shtick. He will constantly defend things like this. Ultimately, there's no real criticism to be found here because he won't really discuss things in depth outside of lolly-based content. And really, all the people I've discussed here don't actually offer any sort of nuanced criticism when it comes to Japanese media. They really only get upset over very superficial things such as a female character having a starring role in an anime or things like lolly getting censored. They won't actually bother to talk about story elements or character development or things that really matter when discussing any media because they just don't really care about that. They're simply making these videos to meet their own agenda. But interestingly enough, there actually is another side to this coin. Some of these anti-woke grifters will actually try to use Japanese media as a comparison point to American media to try and call American media quote-unquote woke. And yes, I wish I was making that up, but sadly this is a real thing. Obviously, the majority of the anti-woke grifters will generally look to mainstream American media to try to call that woke, like things like WandaVision, or the Fantastic Four, or Ironheart, or The Acolyte. It's usually these big blockbuster franchises like Marvel and Star Wars that they often get mad at. But, believe it or not, there actually is one channel that tries to use Japanese media to try and call all American media woke and tries to say you should check out Japanese media instead. This channel is called Ranting for Vengeance, where an Irish Victor from Corpse Bride wannabe will constantly rant about comic books. This guy really hates American comics. But I think the funniest thing he's done is actually try to use Japanese manga as a comparison point towards American comics and tried to say that Japanese manga isn't quote-unquote woke while saying that all American comics are. And if you look at a lot of the manga he brings up, it's really funny if you know the content of them. Because by these guys' definition, there actually are a lot of quote-unquote woke elements in the manga that he brings up. Let's take a look at one of his videos and see what he has to say.
So, do you ever find yourself sick and tired of the Fantastic Four and whatever new crap DC is putting out like Superman. Well, there is a solution. You could go back and read the old comics, or there's something that might even be better: anime and manga. Now, before you laugh, I'm not talking about your bullshit manga and anime that everybody loves, like Attack on Titan and My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen. That's a load of trash. I'm going to be telling you about the real anime and manga that is superior to anything the West has ever put out. I'm just kind of sick of Fantastic Four and Superman. I don't know about you, it might be funny to rag on it for a bit, but it's not just going to be my entire life attacking Fantastic Four.
I love how he says this when, if you look at his page, the next 2 videos he made after making this manga one were exactly that, him bashing Fantastic Four for being woke propaganda. Way to hypocrite, goob from Meet the Robinsons.
There's going to be a few anime and manga that you should check out if you're sick of American comics and American movies and TV shows. So the ones I'm going to be talking about today are ones that will be available or are available now, and are ones that not many people have ever talked about. So after some research and the suggestions from the comments, I've figured out some like Berserk.
Okay, so admittedly this is low-hanging fruit, but calling Berserk an unknown manga is absolutely wild. Berserk is like one of the foundational manga and anime that everybody talks about. How could you have not heard of this one before? I feel like that's like saying you haven't heard of Gundam or Akira. It's one of those major pieces of Japanese anime or manga that everybody knows about. And it's easily one of the most influential as well. Stuff like Dark Souls or Dragon's Dogma or Soul Calibur or Final Fantasy VII and Devil May Cry even were all influenced by Berserk. Heck, even other manga and anime like Chainsaw Man or Attack on Titan were inspired by Berserk. So obviously there is the possibility that Ranting for Vengeance hadn't somehow heard of Berserk before, but the thing is, everybody else knows about it. That's not an unknown manga. Him trying to label Berserk as an unknown manga is just honestly super disingenuous.
I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, but the thing is really badass. And better than almost every American comic out there. Screw The Killing Joke, screw Green Arrow, Green Lantern, screw most DC comics, which are woke garbage by the way, and I'm not saying that Marvel doesn't do that either, because they do, and it's insufferable.
So this is the part I find the funniest of all. Not only does Ranting for Vengeance think that Berserk is a unknown manga, but he also thinks that it's not quote-unquote woke. The thing is, there actually are a number of LGBT characters in Berserk, which if Ranting for Vengeance actually read the manga, he would know this. And this is something he'd probably dismiss as quote-unquote woke propaganda as well. There are 2 explicitly stated homosexual characters in Berserk, the first being Donovan and the second being Genin. And even outside of that, there's pretty notable gay subtext between Griffith and Guts. This has always been a thing since the manga has been running, but apparently Ranting for Vengeance just didn't see that. It's funny that he calls all American comics quote-unquote woke propaganda and tries to recommend you Japanese comics instead, but the Japanese comics he's given you still are quote-unquote woke by his criteria. The jokes really write themselves here. But don't worry everybody, the fun doesn't stop here. Goth Kid from South Park has another pretty telling recommendation for manga here for us.
This one is a bit more common and many people know about it, but kind of brush it off as a comedy, which it is most certainly not. I'm talking about the hard-boiled noir manga that beats Marvel and DC any day, which is City Hunter. Now I'm recommending the manga, which will soon be in print in a massive omnibus, but also I'm recommending the badass anime. Now I might piss some people off here, but have you ever watched Cowboy Bebop? And you thought that the main guy was cool. Oh, he's this badass who's kind of like a bounty hunter, private detective in space. This guy is just going around blowing people away and he's this wisecracking noir character. Yeah, well, he was ripped off directly from 70s Japanese noir movies and this manga right here. So it follows Ryo Saiba, known as the City Hunter, who works as a sweeper, which is basically a private investigator, mercenary assassin in the streets of Tokyo. Now, if you're not sold already, then I don't know what's wrong with you, but basically the manga and the anime take from American 80s action movies, they take from Miami Vice, 40s noir, hard-boiled pulp novels, meshing together to create something that is truly one of the best things I've come across. The best part is, in new manga and anime, the protagonists cry and are wimps, but this guy is just an absolute chad who's always holding a beautiful babe and blown away an evil scumbag with his 357 Magnum. And that's a common trend you'll see with a lot of these good manga and anime. is the fact that the main dudes are not wimps like Deku or Eren Yeager, but are instead more manly than America ever was.
Okay, I find this really funny because he seems to think that City Hunter embraces toxic masculinity, when in actuality, if you read it, that's not really what happens in that manga at all. The main character of City Hunter, Rio, is a pervert who often does try to get with different women, but usually he doesn't and is punished because the manga does recognize this is wrong. There are many times in this manga where Rio actually does come off as a selfish character and embraces toxic masculinity, but he's actually punished for that. And interestingly enough, it's the times when he doesn't act like this that he actually does get the girl, or people actually want to be around him because he's not being a selfish jerk. Kylo Ren here seems to think that City Hunter is celebrating toxic masculinity when, if he actually read it, he would see that it doesn't. And I also find it especially interesting when you look at what he said about the French comic Black Sad in the past, as opposed to what he says about City Hunter.
Yeah, this comic might be taking inspiration from some French stuff, but to be honest with you, every time somebody says that to me, I just get annoyed. You're telling me to go read some French comic that has like 2 pages, because I don't like French comics. Stuff like Black Sad sucks.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
Huh, funny, because that's exactly what Black Sad is too. The comic you just said sucks. Funny enough, both Black Sad and City Hunter are about toxic masculinity tropes and breaking them down, albeit in different ways. John Blacksad isn't quite as much of a womanizer as Rio from City Hunter is, but he still definitely very much is that, and that is part of his character. But, funny enough, just like Rio, this is something he's punished for. This isn't something that's really celebrated as much as deconstructed here. I don't know how Ranting or Vengeance managed to walk away from reading both Blacksad and City Hunter and seem to completely misunderstand what both of them are about. It's completely mind-blowing. Overall, ultimately anti-woke criticism of Japanese media really just isn't real criticism whatsoever, just like how anti-woke criticism of any media isn't real criticism whatsoever. Rather than looking at the things you should analyze when criticizing any piece of media like storytelling, characterization, cinematography, all the things that really matter, these guys would rather get mad if there's a woman in the lead role. Either that, or they just complain about there being no lolly, or just completely misunderstand the point of these media overall. Like the video's title says, it's painfully shallow and it really isn't real criticism. Honestly, stuff like this is really disappointing to me because I really think it defeats media literacy. These are incredibly poor representations of what a review should really be. And honestly, that's why I started doing this series of videos about a month ago now. I'm really tired of seeing this sort of thing pass as a review when it's really just somebody trying to push their own agenda and not actually criticizing anything. Thankfully, you all have been really receptive to what I have to say, and honestly, I really appreciate it. Thanks for enjoying this series over the past month, everyone. I'm definitely gonna keep doing more videos like this. But, since I just talked about a bunch of anti-woke reviewers you probably shouldn't watch, I'm gonna recommend some other reviewers for you to check out. All these channels I'm about to mention do tackle Japanese media in a very critical, analytical sense, I feel like, so I definitely recommend them. First up, Neosai. Neosai is actually a very good critic that often analyzes Japanese video games, especially JRPGs like Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and things like that. He's also talked about a lot of different anime-based games like from Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, and other franchises such as that. Definitely recommend him if you want a fair, honest take on a lot of different Japanese video games. Another one I definitely recommend that you've probably heard of is Super Eyepatch Wolf. This guy got his start doing a bunch of long-form video essays on various anime and manga starting out, and while he's branched out in other forms of media since then, he still does talk a lot about different Japanese media specifically. He's done great videos covering Cowboy Bebop, Berserk, Ghost Trick, which actually is my favorite game of all time, fun fact, so I definitely recommend him quite a bit. Another one I definitely recommend for Japanese media, but also just media overall, is The Birdman. He does a pretty popular series called Everything Wrong with CinemaSins, where he dings CinemaSins at their own game, which I think is pretty funny to be honest, and he's pretty smart too. He's very much on the pulse when it comes to a lot of pop culture and media overall, so I definitely recommend him for that. And he also criticizes anti-woke grifters and calls them out, which we need more of, so thank you Birdman for also doing that, I appreciate it. Definitely go check him and The Birdman out for that especially as well. Another one I definitely recommend for more of a Japanese gaming angle is actually Voyen. Voyen does a lot of different deep dive takes on different Nintendo games, but he'll also talk about other games that aren't first party Nintendo stuff as well, like Persona 5 or Professor Layton. Another one I very much recommend is Manga Kamen. He does a lot of great videos discussing Japanese media overall, both anime and video games, and I especially liked his video on the Devil May Cry anime that he put out recently, since I share a lot of the same sentiments on that one as he does. Boy, Adi Shankar sure has his style. Definitely go check out Manga Common, highly recommend. And the last one I'm gonna recommend here is Nizumi VA. She does a lot of great videos for Japanese anime and video games overall as well, and my personal favorites from her are her Ace Attorney videos. But she's also done plenty of videos on things like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Serial Experiments Lane, and things like that, so you got plenty of content from her to check out too. Overall, while it is pretty disappointing to see these bad faith Japanese media critics out there, I am pretty happy seeing there are real Japanese media critics out there as well. And overall, in the future, I hope we see more of these kinds of critics popping up rather than the anti-woke ones. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Is Metal Gear Solid not woke? Are these critics actually correct? Let me know down in the comments below. Regardless, thank you so much for coming to the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. If you liked it, be sure to give it a like and also consider subscribing as well. I do plenty of videos like this overall about film, animation, and video games, and also talking about bad faith criticism, so if you like things like that, you'll probably like the other videos I have planned as well. If there's a particular topic you think I should cover here on YouTube, let me know down in the comments below, or consider joining my Discord where you can contact me directly. You can also check out my letterbox to see all the movies and shows that I've seen before, some that I've reviewed there that I haven't on YouTube before. You can also follow me on platforms like Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, and all those linked down below. Special thanks to my patrons DDC1996 and Trayvon Gibson for pitching in over there. And also special thanks to Balf Games, Jared the Rabbit, David Deister, and You the Guardian for pitching in as YouTube members. I appreciate you guys pitching in with the extra monetary support to keep me doing what I do here, and thank you very much to you for coming to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Until next time, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!